This is where our winter offensive stopped. Peaceful-looking hills, aren't they? Something like the hills back home. But the countryside of Cassino has helped the Germans build the toughest barrier we'd hit up to mid-May 1944. By mid-January 1944, we and our allies had cleared the enemy from the mountains east of Cassino and had drawn up to the east side of the Rapido Valley. The Allies faced a river, minefields, and barbed wire, all covered by enfilading machine gun fire. The first attempted crossing north of Cassino failed at the riverbank. The Nazis, in this deadly chess game, altered the course of the river, flooding the irrigation ditches, washing out roads, and turning the valley into a swamp. Finally, the tanks used the dry riverbed itself as a route. This attack, with protective cover, carried successfully up to Mount Castellone and Hill 593. The southern attack from San Angelo had already been stopped at the Rapido. Our troops fought their way into town 3 times. The 4th time we stayed. We strained forward to inch up Abbey Hill, from which we could cut Highway 6 and take Cassino from the rear. Whoever dominated the summits of the hills around Cassino dominated the town and the roads leading in and out of it. Enemy observers in the monastery saw our every move the moment we made it. The artillery in the monastery and along the slopes prevented us from reaching the summit, even though we had established positions in the town itself. On February 9th, 75 yards from the Abbey, we were stopped. Here the lines remained for 2 months. The enemy still held the greater part of Cassino and the Monte Cassino Abbey. It became a question of destroying a monument or sacrificing our men. There was actually no question. The troops were withdrawn 1,000 yards. A leaflet was prepared to warn the civilian population to evacuate. Right behind the front lines, they were packed into thin-skinned shells. On impact, the shell would split open. And now, carefully concealed, camouflaged 105 howitzers on gun carriages opened up with a bombardment of warning. "9:28 a.m., February 18th. A-20s were airborne. 226 bombers took part in the attack. Wave after wave of B-25s, and later B-17s, B-24s, B-26s, planted more than 500 tons of bombs in 4 hours. Between waves, our heavy artillery took up the bombardment. Bombardment, the stalemate still existed. The Germans filtered back into their positions on Mount Cassino, reinforced their strongholds in the town. Over Route 6 and through tunnels from the Ducal Palace, supplies streamed into the Nazi Green Devil Parachute Division, clinging to the amphitheater, the Colosseum, the Ducal Palace, the railroad station, the Hotel des Roses, the Yellow House, the Continental Hotel, Castle Hill, and Hill 165. These points were ordered to resist to the last man. Against the menace of the Nazi heights, we held Mount Trocchio. By Trocchio and on Mount Castellone and all along our line, we placed the most massive concentration of artillery pieces of the Italian campaign. From the smallest mortars and howitzers on the border of no man's land to 155 long toms and 240 howitzers in the rear, we were ready to begin the third and fiercest attack. The rear of our lines was a beehive of activity. Troops and M4 Shermans moved up, and at every airfield in the Italian theater, planes were being ready to wipe a city off the map. 155 long toms were dragged by M4 prime movers into their positions. The Positions were carefully chosen to keep down the chance of detection by enemy air or ground observation. The crews were ready, eager. This was the kind of show they had trained for, training that blended these guns completely with landscape. And at last, the 240 howitzer, emplaced with the help of a crane and a prime mover improvised out of an obsolete Sherman tank. Emplacing one of these giants was a specialist job, and every man of the 32 in this section knew each move he had to make, from establishing the line of fire before the howitzer was mounted to inspecting it after the operations were finished. Finally, additional sound plots. With poor visibility, this equipment would be invaluable. The location of each microphone was carefully selected for the best reaction. After that, the line was checked by phone. It checked, so the cylinder was connected and enclosed in a watertight bag. One of the men tested it for sound. It was suspended and finally concealed under a loose layer of dirt. Now, should an enemy gun fire, the microphones would pick up the sound. It would be recorded on film either at a special laboratory or at the command post. The time intervals would be called off to the computer, relayed to the plotting table, and translated into distances. The plotters would then locate the positions of the enemy guns, check them on a terrain map, and phone in the grid numbers to battalion headquarters. And so even if the enemy gun flash were obscured, we'd be able to return his fire within 5 yards of his emplacement. 0830, March 15th. Again, we took to the air. First, the mediums. They came from Sardinia, Corsica, everywhere. Of the Strategic Air Force, B-24s, B-17s. 1,400 tons in 4.5 hours. But nothing was finished. When we stormed what was left of the town, we found that rubble made good concealment for the enemy. Debris made good roadblocks against our tanks. The Nazis' return fire was as strong as ever. We were stopped. But in staff headquarters, new plans of action were on the fire. We will move ahead. We are moving ahead, past Cassino and into the heart of the fortress Europe.
Dense vegetation, insects, swamps, and Japs. It takes plenty of know-how to lick any one of them. In jungle fighting, a hill is a necessary objective. On this particular hill, the Japs got there first and dug in. They were waiting. So we get ready. Ammunition and food. A fighting man gets along okay with only non-coms pass the word around. Don't bunch up. One target of a lot of guys is like hitting a barn, so spread out. And be sure you got enough of what you need and nothing of what you don't need. And then make yourself a one-man arsenal or a walking forest fire or a radio station on feet. Then you start following the telephone wires as far as they run. Those field telephones will carry your voice fine over fallen trees and through streams for 2 or 3 miles. This spot makes a pretty good observation post until a higher one comes along. At least from here, you can see the smoke signals and the panels in the neighborhood when communications break down. About 200 logs, a couple of thousand feet of rope, and 6 engineers get us to the jump-off position the easy way. The lead company, of course, has the hardest job, because there you are, crashing and stumbling through unknown jungle, and you never know behind which log a Jap will be waiting. We learned on Guadalcanal that you can't fight the Japs on the assumption that they aren't there. If you do, sooner or later, a stray shot will make a liar out of you. When you don't know where the fire is coming from, you keep as low as you can and let the jungle cover you. The non-coms move around to keep the unit in hand. It's uphill most of the way. Check on a Jap gadget or two. Soldiers who pick up souvenirs don't usually bring them back alive. While we build semi-permanent fortifications, the mortar squad of the lead company lobs shells over the crest of the hill. Before starting, they cleared the foliage off for yards around, because the nose of a mortar shell just getting away might hit a high branch and explode and kill its own gun crew. Well, the mortars don't make a deep enough dent in the reinforced concrete pillboxes the Japs built. So the artillery observer with Mike Company, that's the outfit on our left, phones back to his batteries 5 miles behind us. But it's getting pretty dark by now, so we're told to dig in. The heavy stuff is going to wait until morning. Pretty soon, the Japs try to find our positions by using star shells. But the trees hang most of them up, so they still don't know where we are. But if we don't watch our step, there are a lot of other ways they can find us.
Marty, listen. Those Japs are signaling to each other.
It's just one of those jungle woodpeckers. Take it easy, Johnny.
This darkness gives me the creeps.
Gives everybody the creeps.
There's a Jap crawling towards us. I'll get that dirty little nip. Hold your fire. It's your own crab.
You gave our position away. We'll catch hell now.
Something you find out after a few nights is keep your mouth shut and stay in your foxhole and you don't get into trouble. But it doesn't look hopeful. Just about when our trigger fingers were getting a little sore, I guess the CO's call got through. We could hear the tank sirens, which is how they signal each other to turn right or left. And start blasting away. We're sniping at the Japs who are trying to make a getaway. When the M4s move ahead, they need us close by to keep the Japs from crawling all over them while they're buttoned up. And acting as the eyes for an M4 driver takes a hunk of headwork. You gotta tell the driver exactly what's going on. Give him exact directions, where to go, what to do. A buttoned-up tank in these jungles is about as blind as a bat. We're going in pretty fast now, and the general turns up. Wants us to pick up a couple of Japs alive. Says something about G2 needing information. So we walk in with everything we have. We pin them down from all sides. And then our BAR teams, mortars, bazookas, and everything we carry with us keep throwing it into all the enemy positions so that we can move in and get the prisoners the General asked for. They've been beat up pretty badly, all right, and outfoxed and outfought. They tell me the groggy Japs passed out enough information for us to go in and clean up the stubborn spots. A little of the heat treatment and a few pounds of steel from fragmentation grenades does the trick. Finally, the job's done. And we're right on top, while we take a well-needed breather. Taking a breather every chance you get, even during battle sometimes, helps plenty. By the time we get back to where the trucks are waiting, well, we're pretty tired. Yeah, it was tough. But just think how tough it was on the Jap. Well, we got the hill and every Jap on it. It's all in a day's work, if you know how.